Welcome to Comic and Screen. My name is Sam Otten, and with me is Jason Book. And in this video, we're going to be talking about Batman issue 25, which is the start of the War of Jokes and Riddles, a new story arc by Tom King. And this issue has art by Mikel Janin and colors by Chung. And we're going to talk about what we thought about the issue and where we think this storyline might be going. So I'm going to start with you, Jason. What was just your overall reaction to the issue, and how are you feeling about the start to this new story?
Well, I like the artwork to start out. I liked his artwork when he first did the Rebirth special back a while ago, so I thought it was pretty strong. It's got like a real kind of photorealistic look to it and kind of cinematic, so I like it. And I like what they're doing with it so far. Being a flashback story, it'll be cool. We see when we get to the end that, Bruce is telling the story about how this all happened and what happened to him. So I feel like it's a lot of setup in this one. Obviously not a lot of payoff yet, but it has a lot of potential. It does suffer for me a little bit of that trying to make the Riddler cool. He's always seemed kind of not a lame villain, but he's just not up there to that level of the Joker, obviously, and things. So they kind of, to me, did some cool things. They made him look almost like Clockwork Orange style in a couple shots to kind of make him look, a little bit more different, have his own style. So I'm interested to see what they do with it.
Yeah, it might be a new take on the Riddler that kind of maybe elevates him a little bit if this story turns out really well. But yeah, I mean, it's doing a lot of the work of a first issue, and to me, it did it really well. So there's this opening scene with the Joker, and one of the things I really like about Tom King and on his whole run with Batman is he just has these memorable scenes. Like, he sets the setting, the art is really locking in with it, and he lets the scene kind of breathe and hit you. Rather than a lot of other comic books where I read them and okay, stuff's happening and I'm going through it, but I can't really remember the definitive scenes. I just kind of remember the plot that happened. Yeah. But in Tom King's, he writes scenes where it's wow, just that scene right there was really effective. We've talked about that before with some of the Bane stuff and some of the stuff at the beginning of his run. And here, I think Tom King, he tried to have a really compelling, striking scene for both of the villains. So the Joker with this comedy scene that's, like you said, it's cinematic. It's kind of framed with widescreen, almost as if you were watching a stage show. And then it's just kind of morbidly Joker kind of thing. And then he goes over to, I think, a really compelling setup scene for the Riddler to try to make us a little bit more intimidated or shocked by what the Riddler can do, with his Riddler's whole thing of breaking out of Arkham and using his knowledge of people's family to walk right by them and out. And to me, I'm wow, that's a scene I'm probably always going to remember now of the Riddler doing that. So for me, that's kind of cool. Like you said, none of it's paying off yet, but for me, it's wow, this looks like it's going to be some pretty intense stories about those two villains.
Yeah, and I agree. Both those scenes were pretty strong for opening scenes. The Joker one especially. So we'll see what they do with it. It's got a lot of potential, and obviously they're going to start messing with each other as the villains always do too. So that should be pretty cool to see what happens there.
Yeah, and it was interesting when they come together, the Joker and the Riddler come together, and, Riddler kind of proposes maybe working together in some way, and I right when I was seeing that, I'm this doesn't seem like it's going to work out because it's called the War of Jokes and Riddles.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Joker, in Joker fashion, is having none of it, so I thought that was a good scene, too. I mean, again, to me, it's wow, there's 4 really great scenes in this book, which is kind of cool for just a single issue.
Yeah, totally.
And also, did you pick up the homage? I think it was on pages 20 and 21 when the Riddler finally comes up and is meeting the Joker. And the Riddler page was an homage to the first appearance of the Riddler, and the Joker page was an homage to the first appearance of the Joker.
Oh, kind of like when the Joker is sitting in that chair kind of thing?
Yeah. Yep.
And then the Riddler, when I forget what the first appearance of the Riddler is supposed to look like.
It's kind of, he's just standing there, but his body posture, they mimicked right after his first appearance. So I thought that was just kind of a cool little wink and nod to classic comic book history.
Yeah, Batman's always been good like that. They get writers that really understand that, especially with all the reboots and stuff that DC has had. Batman really has that rich history, and it's always good when you're putting your own stamp on the character to kind of look back at what's come before you, because there's been some great stuff.
And the other thing that this first issue does, I think that it does well, is it sets up that, okay, a lot more action and a lot more stuff is going to happen as this gets going. There's the big page at the end where you see the Riddler and Joker facing off, and it's almost like a marketing page, right? Here's the 2 big bads, but then look at all these other characters that are going to somehow fit into this story. And it's just like a tease, right? Oh, you're about to see a lot of stuff go down, and join for the ride.
I like the way they're kind of putting that together, and I'm not sure. Are we going to get different artists? Are we going to see this guy working on most of the issues?
I think he's going to be on most of the issues, but I don't know if he's actually all of the issues. That's a good
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Well, it should be cool.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was what did you think about the premise for the Joker and the Riddler both kind of needing Batman dead, but not just to kill him? It's like they need Batman dead because Batman is like holding back their own life or their own kind of joy of living.
Well, I always felt that with the Joker, they've always portrayed that well, that like he really wishes Batman was dead or he killed him himself or something, but if he didn't have him, he wouldn't know what to do with himself. So I like that aspect of it. Now with the Riddler, like I said before, I think they're trying to amp him up a bit and make him a little bit more of a threat and kind of an A-level villain. So maybe they're kind of looking to that side of his character as well. But I think that any good writer working on Batman dealing with obsession with the heroes or the villains is really something that could be in every issue because it's such a huge part of the character's story, I think.
Yep, I think you're right. It definitely fits for a Batman story, and I trust Tom King that it's not just a premise that he's using at the beginning, but I think that Tom King is going to play with those ideas all the way through the story.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool.
All right, so the last little thing I wanted to pick your brain about was the setting up of this narration of Bruce telling this story, because this is back right after Zero Year, which Scott Snyder was writing, and that involved the Riddler, but then the Riddler got locked up, and so this is now kind of the next story that Bruce is remembering. But we do have him telling it as a way of opening himself up to Selina Kyle, who, spoiler alert for issue 24, he proposed marriage to Selina. So what did you think about that as kind of a framing device for the narrative?
I like it if it's kind of for the beginning and the end of the story. If it keeps going back and forth a lot in the story itself, it may take us out of it a little bit. So I like it as a framing device. And, it is a way for him to kind of jump out of the way of the big, news that happened in the issue before. So as long as when they go back to those scenes of Bruce telling the story, it doesn't overshadow what's happening in the past story, I'm fine with it.
Yep, I agree with you. I think it's nice, but it should be used sparingly. Like, they shouldn't beat us over the head with Selina like the whole story. They should let the story kind of get its momentum going.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a nice way to follow up on the proposal without having to go right into, like, the story of them getting married or not getting married or whatever happens. So it's a nice way to kind of draw out that drama a little bit.
True with that, I agree. And speaking of that briefly, anything like that, it reminds me of something gimmicky in a comic. I kind of hope they don't go through with that because it just sets it up to be like, something they could just use against Batman or something that kind of takes a little bit away from the character. I think they work much better when they're kind of flirty and things like that without going the whole way, so to speak.
Yeah. I think if Bruce was going to find anybody that could be a full partner for him, it's Selina, but I kind of agree with you that I'm hoping that in some way it actually doesn't end up happening with like the marriage, but we'll see what happens. That's probably the next thing after this.
Yeah, probably.
All right, cool. Well, we're looking forward to this War Jokes and Riddles. We'll have to see where it's going. The next issue's coming out, right away, so it'll be fun to get into the momentum of the story.
Sounds good. We'll talk about it soon.